Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of Horse's Mouth Live. My name is Ellen Rogan, and as always, we have guests that will help you in every area of your life, especially your business. And we have a really interesting topic today. I think one that people don't necessarily make the connections between, which is about bringing nature and using nature in productivity and how this can actually relate to finances. And so it's perfect for our financial advisor audience, and really excited about our guest, Dennis Andres. And Dennis and I met through a program we're both in. And I feel like, I hope it's okay to say this, Dennis, but we're fast friends. We've had a few conversations. Dennis lives in one of my most favorite places in the world, which is Sedona, Arizona, and he's Mr. Sedona. He's written the hiking books there. He's written the fabulously best-selling book, What is a Vortex? And there's a new edition coming out of that soon, and it's a fabulous book. So if you haven't been to Sedona, then you need to get there. And if you have been, you'll know why I'm raving so much. So, Dennis, before I bring you on, I want to give the audience a little bit more of your formal background. And Dennis is a born adventurer, a longtime outdoor guide. Get this, he's flown with the Dalai Lama, meditated at Machu Picchu, dined with the King of Mustang, which I didn't know where that was, but it's part of Nepal, and they rarely let people from the outside in there, and has outraced an avalanche in Kazakhstan. So while guiding clients across 5 different continents, he's felt this increasing fascination with the connection between nature and energy. And he's noticed it most of all in his home in Sedona, which we just talked about, where if you haven't been, they have these stunning red rocks that draw visitors from around the world. And in Sedona, he now taps nature and energy to coach clients and find focus about increasing productivity and boosting well-being. And so today we're going to be talking about this unexpected connection between nature and productivity and the realm of finance. And I don't think for most of the people in the financial services industry that they would even think about there being a connection there. So, so Dennis, let's start with just talking about this idea of connecting nature and productivity.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Ellen. In fact, if it's okay, I'd like to mention that usually doesn't show up on my bio anymore because it was so long ago. More than 25 years ago, before I launched my career as an outdoor guide, I worked as a financial consultant for the World Bank. And I'll tell you that when I decided to change my path for my true calling to connect with nature, the first thing I noticed was an awful lot of very poor outdoor guides. So the first connection between money and nature was that the people who loved nature didn't seem to be any good at making and keeping money. Fortunately, I think there are more improved connections that we can make today. And I want to use talking about productivity as the bridge to help people in their own personal lives and their personal practices. Then we can talk more about the connections of money and nature, which are, I would say, not only powerful, but wealth producing. I'll explain what I mean in a second. Let me begin with what seem to be the obstacles to productivity for most people, the ones I've experienced. Information overload. Too much or even an addiction to technology. We suffer from sedentary lifestyles, often because we're sitting watching that information or connecting to that technology. And what this tends to result in is not the kind of stress that would kill you in a second. It isn't outright terror. It's this low-level stress that just does not go away. And there's so much good medical evidence now that stress, low-level stress, anxiety, worry, stuff that doesn't kill you today can definitely hurt you physically long-term, not to mention the emotional and the mental toll that it takes. These are the things that inhibit our health. But of course, when we're not at our healthiest, when we don't have the most energy, we can't concentrate. we can't focus. We find that we can't pay attention. These are the things that I often notice today keep people from being super productive at their work. So what does that have to do with today's topic of nature? Every one of those things that I mentioned to you, the technology, the information, the sedentary life, and the stress are aspects of modern lifestyles. They're things that our ancestors didn't face. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't over-romanticize the past. Our ancestors had plenty of problems, like, where's dinner? But these are not our problems. And I think that when people start to talk about nature in the context of modern issues, the fear is that somebody like me is going to go tell you to live in the woods, to spend a month in Tibet. My friends, you don't have to do any of those things. I like modernity. I like technology. I love information. But I know that when it's out of balance, it hurts my productivity. It hurts my success. This is where nature can be most helpful to us by correcting that imbalance that we have between modern lifestyles, which humans have only been experiencing for a couple hundred years. In the case of advanced technology and microcomputers, only a couple decades at most. Whereas nature is the place that we grew up. Nature, for over 1 million years, is not only the place that humans lived, it's the place that evolved us to become who we are today.
So okay, if you're not saying go spend a month in Tibet, which sounds awesome to me, but let's say that for most of us, it's not super practical. So I have questions about how do you bring it into your life, but before we get there, like, how does that being in nature offset every day, this kind of underlying buzz of stress that we're dealing with, whether it's from, our devices, being on, even more so now, being on video conferencing or sitting. How does that work? I mean, I know I usually feel better when I get outside, but it's not necessarily a deliberate practice as a way to be more productive.
That's such a fantastic question, Ellen. I really appreciate you asking it because something has changed. For many years, it was very difficult for scientists and researchers to examine the results of being in nature on human physiology. Now, people that walked in nature had kind of a sense that it was good for them, just as you said, right? You feel better when you're out there. But because nature is not a laboratory with 4 walls, because the equipment to measure the change in our physiology, in our brain state is for so long was just enormous. And it certainly wasn't on wheels. It wasn't something we could strap up to somebody and push around to follow them as they went through on a walk in nature. Changes we've had over the years have been tremendous in terms of being able to put micro technology and attach it to people's heart, to their brain, etc. And this is allowing us to prove scientifically not only the things that outdoor people have always suspected, but a wide range of positive benefits from nature that nobody ever knew about. There's just so many of them, and some of the information that's come today.
Okay, so what are some ways then that, so it's good for us to do it. What are some ways in our busy lifestyle, and I'm particularly thinking about people that maybe live in urban areas, that it's not so easy. I live in a suburb. I can go walk outside. It's very snowy today. I can be outside and it's pretty and get some fresh air. But if I lived in downtown Chicago, it would be a different experience, or if my office was there. So let's get a little practical in terms of how someone might be able to incorporate this into their daily life.
Ellen, I want to give you a 2-part answer. The first bit we'll answer some of the practicalities. I also want to address, made clear in my prior answer about how this happens. So, two conclusions from my 25 years of research on human beings being outside in nature. But first, let me just talk about the word nature for a second. We use it to mean so many different things, but I want to keep it simple today. Generally speaking, I'm using the word nature rather than the word environment because the environment is sort of a concept. You don't really go for a walk in the environment. You go for a walk in nature. Nature is a place that you form a relationship to. And I think that everyone listening today cares in their own way about the future of the planet and the importance of saving the environment. But what I'm finding is that people in poll after poll are telling us that they love the environment, but they never go into nature. That's what we need to shift. You can't love something that you don't have a relationship with. And when you do have a relationship with it and you like it or you love it, then it's easy to fight to protect it. I didn't come on today to talk about the environment because most people, when they think about the environment, it just depresses them. The only news we ever hear about the environment is just terrible news. But what's great about all the science now about nature is that because of these abilities to adapt the technology to people actually in nature, not just talking about it after they've been out there, what we're finding is that nature undoes tech overload. It deletes information addiction. It cures sedentary lifestyles, and it wipes out low-level stress. Nature, in other words, is not just the antidote for these problems. What I discovered is that nature, because it was the place we lived for so long as a species, nature is the human recharger. What I mean by that is the things that ail us as modern humans are not just neutralized by nature. Nature charges up our energy, just like you would charge up your cell phone, just like you would charge up your iPad. Nature is the place to go to recharge. So before my most important meetings, before today's live cast, I make sure to spend time in nature because I know it's going to put me at my best. And that's a different way of thinking about productivity. Maybe some people have thought about taking time in nature after a meeting, after a success, at the end of a year, at the end of Christmas, to take that bonus and take a vacation. But I'm telling you, there's something about nature that makes it a human success formula. It's not an accident that not only successful financial advisors, but the wealthiest people in the world buy real estate that's connected to beauty and nature. 2/3 of the wealthiest homes on the planet have water within the property, next to the property, or looking out on it. What is it they know about nature? It's that nature does this something that we've all sort of sensed, but never appreciated how truly important and helpful it is for productivity.
Is there a minimum dosage? Like if I'm, if I'm taking a break and want to go outside and take a walk or take the dog for a walk or is there a minimum amount? I know the more is better, but is there an amount that I should make sure I get to either keep even with the stress or ahead of it?
Ellen, it's such an intuitive question because that's one that we really didn't know. And I can tell you, being for years as an outdoor guide, I was able to track up close whether I was out with clients on just a short 2-hour tour, on a half-day outing, on a full-day outing. There were clients I took abroad for a week, for 14 days on outdoor adventures. Here is the good news. Even a tiny bit of nature helps. we've been able to measure physiological benefits to people who've been in nature for 5 minutes. Now, I would like you to spend more time in nature than that. But in order to get you to Tibet for 30 days, you got to go through 5 minutes first. Here's even better news. Today, I know we're going to get to things that can help you if you live in a city, if you're in a winter environment. But one of them is that your connection with nature can begin without even leaving your office, without even going outside. Looking at a postcard of a beautiful place in nature has been shown to improve executive function, right? Which is the part of your brain that makes decisions and set priorities. Looking at a plant, being in the presence of a plant, not only does that, but it also has measurable results for your blood pressure and your stress levels. So the connection to nature does not have to start with a bunch of heavy equipment or a long distance trip. It can start indoors right around you. And sorry if this is a long answer, but just to take it a little bit further, there is some bad news. The bad news is not about nature. The bad news is that researchers at the University of Michigan have also measured what happens to humans when they're looking at urban and human-made structures. And the bad news is we become depressed. Look at them long enough and your state of your mood drops lower and lower and lower. So my friends, nature is just not an alternative option you need to keep your productivity up. I suggest just to stay even, you need to start adding some nature to your environment.
That's really interesting. I want to get to, if you do live in an urban area, what you can do. But as you were saying that it makes people depressed, it got me thinking about how during quarantine and lockdown, a lot of cities have, a lot of people have moved out of the cities. Our son was in New York City and he's moved out. He's actually out in Colorado now to spend the winter somewhere where he can be outdoors more, working remotely. And I wonder if I'm speculating, and maybe you have an opinion about this, is when people were at home more and what they were doing was just looking out their window, or if they had that to go through, it felt so confining that it's had them feeling called to live somewhere where it's easier to be in nature. You think that's part of it, or it's just their spaces and they got scared of COVID and it was more up here was the reason that they fled cities?
I would say two things are involved. One is simply the free time, right? We suddenly had a bunch of time on our hands because we didn't have to commute. And I'm pleased that although obviously most people will go back to work, a really substantial portion of people will not be going back to an office to do work. And I'm thrilled about this because nature is so different throughout the day. Being able to be in nature at different times of day, as a short mid-morning break for 5 to 15 minutes during your workday, to be out at lunchtime, to take that same break in the afternoon, to get out before the sun goes down in the evening, or even at night, to look at the moon set, to notice the stars at night. These are all ways that ancient people connected to nature, and I truly believe, Ellen, that call of nature is still within us. We just needed to slow down long enough to hear it. Statistics tell us that 55% more Americans are taking walks outside than before the pandemic struck. Of Americans who already took walks, they're going on longer walks. Now, besides the fact that probably the biggest beneficiary of the pandemic are dogs, I think that what's happening from people being outside is a virtuous cycle. It just leads to people wanting to be more outside. I should mention, by the way, that I grew up in the three worst places in the world to learn English: Brooklyn, Long Island, and New Jersey. When my mother told me that if I saw any nature, I should step on it and get it out of the house, this was not the kind of upbringing that led me to become an outdoorsman. So I really relate to people who live in cities and suburbs, which have been very much denatured. Let's face it, when this country began, it was 80% rural. Today, most suburbs have far more concrete and human-made structures than even cities did back then. So we have become distanced from nature. But I also want to say that you don't need to go to the wilderness. You don't need to buy a bunch of equipment. And perhaps at another time we can talk about how to go deeper into nature. But what I'm talking about today is nearby nature, and it begins right at your front door. As soon as you get outside, you're in nature. Now, can you do it better if you got a little more time? Yes. If you can see more green, if you can see more water, if you have a clearer sense of the elements, the breeze or the sunshine, what the research shows is that's going to amplify the benefits. But to come back to the start of your question, yes, even a tiny bit of nature is good for you.
So I want to come back to some other tips if you have them, but let's tie this back to finance. So we said, we teed up at the beginning, this helps with productivity, but what does that have to do with money or finances?
I have a couple of observations about nature that I want to share with your audience, and perhaps we'll get feedback from them about what they think about this. But I'd like to make the case that most observations about finance began as observations about nature. You know, people in finance talk about tax season, shopping season. My father was an accountant, right? We didn't talk to him between late February and April 16th, right? Seasonality is a crucial part of business. Well, sorry, nature seasons came from nature. Another concept, clearly that's there, growth. Growth is fundamental to nature. We learned about growth, being human beings in nature is something people in finance talk about all the time. Now, those are just two. There's plenty of others, right? Nature fits so nicely with investments. It fits with spending and saving have corollaries in nature. So that's one thing I want to talk about is to encourage financial advisors to look to nature for the metaphors that are there. The second thing I would say is that nature gives us a sense of perspective. Here's how I would explain it. The currency, now I'm going to use a financial term to explain a metaphor about nature, if that's okay. I'm going to switch it up here. But we all understand that an economy can't run without currency. Nature has currency as well. The currency of nature are the four elements. When the elements are in balance, things are harmonious, things go well. When elements are out of balance, you get tornadoes, flooding, wildfires, earthquakes. In other words, when the elements are out of balance, you get disasters. I'm guessing that financial advisors are typically working with people who don't have money in balance in one of two ways. Some people tend not to think about money at all. We know about those kind of clients. We know how challenging it can be to work with them, to help them put money in balance so they pay enough of attention to it. But there are also clients that you know who never stop thinking about money, currency. And so we all know what happens there. They're experiencing anxiety, worry about money from overthinking it. What we want, of course, is balance. I don't think it's an accident that so many wealthy, successful, creative figures throughout history have gone to nature to find perspective. You see, nature is an economy that is not based on money. It is a non-monetary system that is full of wealth and abundance. I never ever feel poor when I go into nature, and I don't think most other people do either. And by the way, I'm not poor anymore. But even outdoor guides who are poor can feel wealthy in nature. The point is not how much money you're bringing to nature, but but what I'm saying is it gives you perspective. So besides giving you metaphors that you can take advantage of, being in nature for financial advisors provides you and potentially your clients a bit of perspective. Is it possible for you to take your clients on a walk in nature? Maybe not right now. Maybe you need to increase your connection to nature first before you can do it with them. But I will tell you from having interviewed some of the wealthiest financial advisors on the planet, either because they've been my clients or they've come to me to set up adventures, that rich people love nature and they are spending time there sometimes to get away from money and sometimes to gain perspective on it.
I actually love the idea of advisors taking their clients on walks in nature. And if COVID hasn't done anything, like I have had networking walks, met people just out. I know I connected you with someone recently, and she told me you guys took a walk together. And when I think about, I know you know this, and I know our audience knows this, but people get very stressed about money, and their conversations about money can be very stressful. So the idea of bringing your client out to walk in nature actually seems like a beautiful idea.
I think so too. Now I realize it may be impractical. So here's some other ways that you can perhaps introduce it into the client relationship. Certainly if you're meeting with people in person, having some nature in your office, right? Having some plants. It doesn't just work on you, it works on the other people in the room as well. Having images of nature, photography, painting, etc., absolutely makes that difference. It's going to make your client calmer when they're looking at it as well. For advisors that might be willing to go a little bit further to have your client imagine or visualize being in nature. How many of your clients, how do I say this? One thing that I just love about financial advisors that I don't think the mainstream sees is that it isn't just talking about people and money. It's about how to use the money, how to set your priorities and align your money to it. That's what I see in the best financial advisors. Well, one of the things that people want to do with their money, where they want to be someday with their money, is on a beach, climbing a mountain, swimming in the ocean, walking through a forest. Introducing those ideas and concepts in a visualization or just using those kinds of words can be helpful. And I'll give one simple quick tip. You can ask your clients, what's your connection to nature? Or where is a place of natural beauty you'd love to see someday? And instantly that'll tell you something about your client.
Yeah, I love that. And as you were talking earlier about going out for walks, we are lucky enough to live about a third of a mile from Lake Michigan and spent so many days. I saw Lake Michigan more in the last 9 months than I probably have in the 24 years we've lived in our house, added up together. Beautiful. And we are one of those families that got a dog during this. And our dog, Honey, is adorable. She actually doesn't like taking walks. So that's something we're working on because I've seen a lot less lake since we've had Honey, but I've seen a lot of dog park. So I have been able to be in nature. But this was so
Let me interrupt.
Yeah.
I can interrupt just for a second. Sorry. So the audience may have recognized that I posed a question that led Ellen to talk about her connection to nature. Your clients will do the same. They may tell you about that place they want to be in nature in the future, but they may also bring up a place they've been in nature in the past or their connection to it today. And then what did Ellen do? She started talking about her dog. We started to see what matters to Ellen, right? And that's how we can advise people. We have to know what matters to them. And this is such a ingeniously simple way to do it that is not intimidating to people.
Good. Well, thank you. I'll add in my husband goes on walks too, so it doesn't make it sound like that Stephen's not important too. He's more important than honey. But
Yeah.
great. So Dennis, this is so helpful, so thought provoking. I'm going to make sure that I get outside this afternoon for sure. If people want to get a hold of you to learn more about the work that you do, what's a good way for them to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so we're building a new website. It won't be up till about mid-February. The best way is to call me via email. You can see it on the screen. It's mrsedona@gmail.com. And if you do right now, I have 3 more secrets to walking in winter, some goodies that I can share with people. I'm happy to respond to any emails that make it easier still to go outside in nature for anybody who's having a challenge with it. I totally relate. It's inertia tends to keep us out indoors, but it's more important than ever to get outdoors. And there's all kinds of new fun things being invented to help people get outside easily. mrsedona@gmail is the best way to reach me.
Dennis, thank you so much. I always love our conversations. And I've been talking to Sean Bailey of Horse's Mouth, and we're talking about hopefully doing a retreat there for the Extraordinary Advisor program that we're doing at some point when people are super comfortable flying and going to other places. So hopefully we'll be able to work with you on that. And so thank you for your wisdom and being here with us today.
I would love to work with you, and I look forward to talking to you again, Ellen. Thanks so much, and so long to your audience.
Yeah, and for all of you out there, again, my name is Ellen Rogan, and Doug, who is our producer, flashed up on the screen. We are offering the Extraordinary Advisor Masterclass again this spring. We got rave reviews from the advisors that were in there, saying it was one of the best classes they've taken. One advisor increased her AUM 25% in a month. I can't promise that, but was really great, and they really enjoyed meeting each other. So check us out there, and we have some webinars coming up as well, so stay tuned for that. And for each and every one of you listening, thank you so much again for being here. And remember to be great and create great every single day, and get out in nature.